Hello everybody, this is your review video for the Unit 7 Living Environment unit that we just did on ecosystems, which includes invasive species. So an ecosystem, where's my pointer? There it is. Okay, so an ecosystem is the interaction of a living or biotic, that's another word to say that, organisms with its non-living abiotic environment. So it's the interaction of living things with the non-living things. So for example, our ecosystem, we have all kinds of humans, we have plants, we have animals, and we interact with our abiotic environment, which might be the ocean, might be the temperature, might be the light, things like that. So some other examples of ecosystems are a tropical rainforest, a regular forest, grasslands, all these things that you guys probably have all heard of. So the most important thing is interaction of living and non-living things. That makes your ecosystem. All right, to start off with the invasive species. See these little guys down there? They were brought here by somebody and they're causing harm. That is what invasive species do. They are introduced to an ecosystem by humans and they cause harm, although these guys probably aren't humans. They're probably aliens, so don't use that as an example. But aliens are not really real, so I don't think you would do that anyway. Or maybe they are real. All right, I'm going to start this video over. Maybe I'm not. Okay, ignore what I just said. Invasive species. They may destroy habitats. This is how they cause harm. So they're brought by humans and they cause harm to an ecosystem. They may destroy the habitat. For example, swans, they pull up all the grass from the bottom of the bay and nobody can live there anymore. They also might reduce the food available for native species. They might eat everything and then nobody else has anything to eat. And then the native species, native means the ones that are naturally there. These guys would die if they don't have enough food. And also they're a problem because they don't have any natural predators. So there's nobody in the ecosystem that wants to eat it. So they grow out of control. Some examples that we discussed in class are the zebra mussel. These are freshwater, so they live in rivers. For example, the Hudson River and the Great Lakes. They hide in boats. They're tiny. This is actually I think they're like an inch wide, which is probably like the size of half your thumb. And they hide all over people's boats and they get brought by humans to different ecosystems where they use up all of the nutrients and they clog pipes and they basically choke out all the other native species that are supposed to live there. So they remove food that would normally be eaten by other organisms. That's algae. They just filter all this algae through and they take it away from the other guys. But they also clog pipes for water treatment plants, and nobody eats them. That's a big problem. They don't have any predators, so they grow out of control. Balance is very important in an ecosystem. You have to have a balance of predators, prey, consumers, producers, in order to make things stable. Another invasive, I'm not going to go through all these invasive species because I don't want this video to be 40 minutes like the last one, but read this, the mute swan, another example of an invasive species because it tears up habitat and eats food. This Asian longhorned beetle is nasty. Could you imagine? He's just gross. Okay. But he destroys trees. He drills holes in trees. He was brought here from Asia and he's causing a big problem. And the lionfish, this is probably the coolest one, I think, but it's very, very dangerous. Sometimes we can actually see these on Long Island in the summer. And they're poisonous and they consume shellfish and other small fish, leaving no food for everybody else. And they're really poisonous and they hurt. I think I just said that. Okay. So why are invasive species so bad? They have no natural predators, so they grow like crazy. They eat everybody else's food and they destroy everybody's habitats. So no one has a place to live. Not very nice, but it's not their fault. So here's just a website you could go to if you are interested in making sure you don't have any invasive species. If you're one of the lucky ones that has a boat around here, most of the things we're talking about are freshwater. At least the mussels were freshwater. So anyway, I'm going to keep going. Watch this video if you have time. It's really cute. Components of stable ecosystem. So in order for an ecosystem to stay stable, it has to have several things. It has to have a wide variety of organisms that are all working together. Energy flows in an ecosystem and matter cycles. I'll talk about this more. That's very important. Among the organisms and between organisms and their environment, creating a dynamic interconnected systems. So both biotic and abiotic factors are components of a stable ecosystem. So what factors are required for a stable ecosystem? They have to recycle their nutrients and get minerals from the soil, but mostly just remember they recycle their nutrients. Talk about that more in a second too. And they use sunlight as a source of energy. Does that get recycled? Does energy get recycled? No. We don't ever send our energy back up to the sun. That would be crazy. Energy comes from the sun to the earth and it stays here and it gets used up. But matter, nutrients get recycled. The size of populations have to be maintained so that overgrazing, which means eating too much grass or plants, or other kinds of overuse don't occur. And biodiversity, that means you have a lot of animals. That has to be maintained. Just some vocabulary for you before we start diving a little bit deeper into this. Herbivores, you know what they are. They eat plants. Or plankton or algae, but anything they eat producers. Carnivores eat meat. They eat other animals. And omnivores eat both. One thing I didn't put on here is producers. I think that's later, but producers would be like the grass or this plant back here. Those are they're taking the sun's energy and converting it to chemical bonds of glucose. Right there. And that's how energy is stored on the planet Earth. All right, so a food web is a way to show the relationships between organisms, who eats who. You guys get this. This is not a difficult concept, and you've all done really well on this. Just remember the way the arrow points. It goes in the direction of energy flow. So if there was a sun here, I'd say, okay, the arrow is going to point from the sun to the phytoplankton or the seaweed. And then the energy is going to go from the seaweed to the crab because the crab is going to eat the seaweed. Just like if you eat a hamburger, you get your energy from the hamburger. So it goes in the direction of energy flow. The squid is now going to eat the crab. So the crab's energy is going to go into the squid. So direction of energy flow. Trophic pyramids. So at the bottom of this is just another way to show who eats who and how the energy flows through an ecosystem. So at the bottom level, you're going to have your primary producers, like your plants, your algae, your phytoplankton. They use solar energy to produce organic energy storage compounds. What's that called? Glucose, through photosynthesis. So herbivores, which are the animals that feed solely on plants, make up the second trophic level. Okay, so we have our plants, then we have our herbivores, then we have predators that eat herbivores. These guys are going to eat these guys. Okay, and then we have up at the very top another predator who's going to eat these guys. So each level, you're showing who eats who. So the direction of energy flow is going up because energy is going from the plants into the herbivores, then into the predators, then into the secondary predators. We also have decomposers on here. They play a very, very important part of this food chain. It's called here decayed detritivores, but we're going to call them decomposers, including usually bacteria and fungi. Those are the ones that we focus on most in our class. They break down the nutrients and they send it back up into the plants. They take the dead animals, recycle their nutrients, and put them back into the ecosystem through the plants. This is just another way to show the same kind of thing. Producers are at the bottom of the food chain. This is where they get the energy. Where they store the energy. And what else do I have here? Producers. Yep, we know that. Okay, so here we have the producers at the bottom. These have the bacteria, these decomposers here. I don't really like them piled together with the producers, but because they're not producers, so don't look at that. So the mid-level consumers eat. I'm not even going to go through this. You guys know all this stuff. Everybody eats it. Everybody eats who's ever underneath them on the pyramid. Decomposers break down organic matter. These are two important words. Organic. What does that mean they have in them molecularly? They have carbon and hydrogen. So they break down organic matter and recycle them into inorganic molecules that can then be used by other organisms, especially plants. Nutrients are recycled, energy is not. I'm going to talk about that more. So this is I love this figure. This kind of says everything you need to know about this in one nice little colorful figure. It's an energy pyramid, right? The most energy that's available in this whole pyramid is down in your primary producers. That's because the sun just shined on a beautiful day and all of the grass was stimulated to undergo photosynthesis, and they stored all of the energy that they could in the form of glucose. So you have the most energy that's available in the whole ecosystem in the primary producers. Every time somebody eats somebody else, you're going to lose 10% of that energy. But why? That's because organisms use energy for everything. When your cells are replicating, when you go for a walk, even when you're sleeping, when your heart's beating, your cells are using up energy, right? So that energy is getting used, and it's not just getting stored. Imagine if everything you ate just got stored in your body. I don't think any of us could walk into this building. So we use up a lot of energy every single time you go up one of these levels, because we're using it for our metabolism, for all of our metabolic activities. And that energy, the excess energy, is lost as heat. So at every level, you're losing that extra energy as heat, because heat is a byproduct of cellular respiration. Okay, but notice this does not go back around. The heat's not going back into the primary producers. Once that heat is gone, it's lost into the ecosystem, and you have to have a constant supply of energy from the sun to keep this flowing. Okay, it's not stored, it's not recycled. You need new energy from the sun every single day. However, nutrients do get recycled. So whenever one of these guys dies and they're laying on the floor of the forest or wherever, eventually decomposers will come and degrade the organic materials in their bodies into tiny, tiny pieces. It's almost like building a Lego house, like deconstructing a Lego house. You're going to break it back down into tiny, tiny pieces so that you can build up again. So they're recycling these nutrients back into the ecosystem. And these are never go away. These are never destroyed. They constantly go around and around and around through the different trophic levels of an ecosystem. Very important point. Energy is lost as it goes up the food chain. Matter are not lost. They are recycled. Biomagnification. This is the idea that the concentration of toxins, these are bad things. It could be mercury, it could be DDT, it could be any of these nasty things that we find in our environment sometimes. So the concentration of them in an organism as a result of its ingesting, that means eating, other plants or animals in which the toxins are more widely dispersed. So biomagnification, that means, look at here, imagine these little dots are the toxins, okay? In the water, there's not so many of them, right? But then you have the producers. The producers are going to use some of that water for their daily activities, their metabolism, right? They're taking in energy from the sun and converting it into glucose. They've got a few more of these toxin molecules, right? And then every time somebody eats somebody else, the number of molecules multiplies by a factor of 10. I think this is probably just, I'm not sure this is an exact number, but let's just say it's a factor of 10. So you get into the further you go up the food chain, the more toxins these people are going to have. These bioaccumulate. So they're stored. This bird that eats all these fish is getting all the toxins that each of them have accumulated. And because he's eating so many more of them, he's going to have a ton of toxins in his flesh. It's usually stored in fat. This is true of humans too. So when humans eat large fish, you are eating the toxins that they have stored in their flesh. Some people will say it's healthiest to eat the lowest on the food chain that you possibly can, like the producers. An example of biomagnification, this is also called bioaccumulation sometime, was the osprey on Long Island. This is a very interesting study. You can read more about it on here. But long time ago, I think it was not that long ago, You guys are young. It's long to you. In the 70s, I believe, people were using DDT to prevent pesticides. They wanted to kill the mosquitoes. But what they found out was that the DDT wasn't just killing the mosquitoes. It was getting ingested, and the mosquitoes would get eaten by small fish. And then those small fish would be getting eaten by larger fish. And then the osprey would come down and he hunts. He dives down to get the fish. You guys have probably seen these nests all over Long Island. He hunts and he eats the fish and all the toxins that were in the mosquito, all the DDT that were in the mosquitoes and then in the small fish. It just piles up in this little guy's flesh. And the females were having eggs that were very brittle. And so the offspring were dying and they were endangered on Long Island. And now they're back since DDT was eliminated. So that's a good thing. All right, this is just a good video about how energy flows through ecosystems and nutrients are recycled. We already talked about this stuff. All right, limiting factors. They are things that limit the growth of the population. How much time have I been talking to you guys? I don't know how to figure that out. Anyway, so these are things that could limit the growth of a population. For example, if a population runs out of food, nutrition would be the limiting factor. If a plant doesn't get enough sun, light would be the limiting factor in its growth. Some examples are light, nutrients, oxygen. Those are abiotic factors because they're not living. Some examples of biotic living factors are predators, prey, and the amount of producers. So relationships in an ecosystem. You guys, I think you all know this pretty well too. Predator, prey, symbiosis, parasite, host. Predator, prey. One organism is benefited and the other is killed. That's pretty straightforward. The predator is the killer and the prey is the poor little guy that gets eaten. This is such a great video. You should show this to your whole family tonight. The importance of predators. Remember the wolves were hunted in the late 1800s or the mid 1800s. There were no wolves left in Yellowstone and it completely destroyed the whole ecosystem in ways they didn't even realize. And they brought the wolves back and this shows what's been going on. It's kind of an incredible study. Symbiosis is relationships where one or both species can benefit. You don't have to know these. You should recognize them as forms of symbiosis, maybe the names. But symbiosis, nobody's getting hurt. And at least one of them is getting helped. Parasite host, one of them is getting helped and the other one is getting harmed in sometimes very disgusting ways. Remember this guy that infects the brains of ants? And this one was like the kitty litter toxin. It's kind of gross, but you can rewatch that if you want. But parasite host, one's helped where the other's harmed. An example we use a lot is the tick and the dog. Coevolution. I think this is so cool. One animal evolves over time. For example, for the deer, they evolved over time to get faster. And the wolves evolved after them to get faster too, because only the wolves that could run fast enough to keep up with the new fast deer would eat and then have enough nutrition to have offspring. So you often see this where one will evolve and the other will evolve with them. We saw this really cool example with the bats and the moths, where the bats would upgrade their ability to find moths using sonar, using their ears, and then they grew really big ears. Meanwhile, the moths were creating new ways to evade the bats. They grew ears. They learned how to dive down. It's all kinds of really cool things. So coevolution, that's another example. All right, predator-prey relationships. So this is like population dynamics. You're looking at the number of animals over the course of time. And usually in a predator-prey relationship, you're going to see the predators. Oh, we're looking at the moose right now. These would be the prey. The moose goes up and then the predators goes up right after that. And that's because, and you guys all know this too, now there's more food. So the predators are going to survive. And then you see the prey dropping. That's because there's more of them getting eaten. And this is a sample of a stable ecosystem. This is what you would expect to see. Rising and falling of predator and prey. Everybody's happy. Nothing's going like off the charts because then they would just drop because they would run out of resources. This is kind of what I just said. Carrying capacity is the number of individuals that an ecosystem can hold. What's the carrying capacity of the Earth? You know what? There's 7 billion people on the Earth right now. I wonder what the carrying capacity is. I bet somebody calculated it. If one of you guys finds out, tell me. This is also a good time for me to tell you a secret. You're going to get bonus points if you write the word, what should I do? Lentils. I'm just thinking about it a lot. Write the word lentils on the top right corner of your Scantron, and I'm going to give you bonus points because that means you really watched this video. But don't tell your friends because there's going to be a limited number of bonus points. Okay, so I'm just going to divide them up among the people that write it, but don't tell everybody because then that means everybody gets fewer points. All right, carrying capacity. That's the number of individuals that a ecosystem can hold. All right, and I think this is our last little part here. Succession. How life gets to how life becomes in a certain place. That makes no sense, but you know what I mean. Primary succession. Primary succession is where there was never any life before. This is ecological succession. Sometimes it's referred to as ecological succession, not just succession. Primary is first. So this is the first time life ever arises on a particular place on the planet. This can be underneath a glacier if a glacier recedes, or more commonly a volcanic island. If a volcano just erupts in the middle of the ocean and it lays down new lava, it creates a new island. So here we see the first things that are going to grow in an ecosystem are the pioneer species. You know, pioneers are like explorers. They're the first ones to go out to California during the gold rush. The first pioneer species is usually a lichen. This is actually a mix. It's a symbiotic relationship between usually a fungus and a plant. It can be any different kinds of fungus and plants, but that's the first one. You see there's no nutrients in the soil here, but the lichens start to pull some minerals out of the rocks, and they use photosynthesis, and they start to put some nutrients in the soil here. And that gives way for these little annuals to grow. Annuals are plants that have to come back every year, or that get reseeded every year. And then you're going to have grasses and perennials. These are going to come back on their own every year. And look at the soil. The more activity, biological activity you have going on in the surface, the more nutrients are getting put into the soil. We've got decomposers working down here to make that nutrients available for the new plants. And then you're going to have some larger species. Finally, you're going to come to your climax community. This is the community of organisms that are going to remain here basically for the rest of the existence of this ecosystem, unless there's a massive disruption like a fire or a flood, or if the climate changes dramatically, if it becomes very hot, if it becomes very cold. Those are things that can change the climax community. But at each stage of this process, these organisms are preparing the environment for these organisms. These organisms are preparing the environment for these guys, and so on until you get to this stable climax community that's going to last a very long time. And this process takes hundreds of years to go from bare rock to this climax community. Okay, so disruptions to ecosystems. Imagine you've got this beautiful climax community, everybody's well established and happy, and all of a sudden you catch on fire, or you have a flood, or something bad. Look at those I didn't even notice this before. How do you play basketball underwater like that? You could maybe play, you could get kayaks and play basketball. Okay. So after a fire, this process, so now we have secondary succession. This is the second time life is being established in this area. Essentially the same process. However, it's faster. The other one was hundreds of years. This is about 150. And you see there's already a lot of nutrients in the soil. So everything's going to come back a little bit faster. And you need to know that this climax community, unless there's a major change in the climate, it's going to be very similar to what it was when it started. Because the climate really helps determine what organisms can live in any ecosystem. So they're going to the same ones are going to basically come back. All right, I'm kind of rushing now because the bell's going to ring and I don't want it to get noisy in here. Biodiversity, very important word. It's all of the variety of life in the world or a particular habitat or ecosystem. So biodiversity, this means life Diversity means a variety, right? So we've got a variety of life. Look at the variety of flowers in this ecosystem. You have so many different species. So they're going to support a lot of different animals. They're going to be food sources for different insects. So that's going to help create a really stable ecosystem. And this is important. Here's another vocab word, a niche. A niche is a role or a job that an organism has in an ecosystem. Okay, so if you say, for example, you could be a predator, your job could be prey, your job could be decomposer, your job could be a producer. Those are the niches. So if I ask you what a niche is or a niche, I don't know how to say it. For these guys, it would probably be a food source for herbivores. Oh gosh, what just happened? Are you kidding me? Oh, don't look at that. Oh, darn it. Oh God, I don't know what just happened. Okay. Okay. Biodiversity is critical for an ecosystem to be stable. And when biodiversity goes down, the ecosystem is less stable. I think I'm going to have to do this all over again. Okay. How does this sexual reproduction provides more gene combinations, and more gene combinations leads to the ability for things to adapt better to their environment, right? Sexual reproduction causes genetic variations, like, animals might be less prone to disease, or they might be like a little bit faster, or maybe they can digest food a little bit more and get nutrients out of it. So genetic diversity in a species makes it more apt to survive. Competition, we know what that is. Adaptations, they adapt to where they live. All right, this might be the last thing I'm going to show you. Okay, things that help ecosystems, genetic diversity, biodiversity, a stable climate. Things that hurt them, lack of genetic diversity, lack of biodiversity, a changing climate. All right, I think that's about all. I might have a question or two on the finches. I don't know. All right, I think I'm going to stop there. I hope I don't have to just do this over again. Let me know if you have any questions. I will have extra help today and tomorrow. Today and Wednesday, but you can always get in touch with me to ask questions. You can come see me on my lunch or whenever. Okay, bye.